You're listening to the Fit Mind, Fit Body podcast, where we explore the connection between running and positive mental health. We do this by talking to runners from all walks of life who generously share their experiences with us. So you don't miss an episode, I've created an email list for you to join. Check the show notes for more details. Without further ado, I'm your host, Michelle Frost. Let's get moving. Welcome to a special episode of Fit Mind, Fit Body podcast, where today we're embarking on an inspiring journey with Aleah Ava. Strap in as Aleah shares her vibrant adventures and holistic insights on running and well-being. Whether you're lacing up your running shoes or seeking a dose of motivation, Aleah's stories are here to ignite your spirit and inspire your path. Let's dive in and discover the joy of moving, exploring and growing with Aleah Ava. Today on Fit Mind, Fit Body, I'm really excited, like I always am, but today I get to introduce you to someone who's on the other side of the world. Probably literally, if I dug a hole from my office, I would probably end up in this person's living room, perhaps. Aleah Ava, all the way from Italy. Welcome to the podcast.
Oh, thank you so much, Michelle, for having me. I already love it. We have been laughing like 5 minutes already, this is a good thing.
I know. It's one of my problems, as I said to you. When do I hit record? It's like,
Yeah,
we should stop talking
exactly.
quick. I've got to hit record. This is good stuff that we're talking about. Especially, I love this form of podcast that I've seemed to have stumbled upon, where I just get to go out into the world and meet new people. But when I'm meeting them, I'm also introducing them to other people. And then all these people who are listening are also getting to meet you at the same time. And it's just delightful. I just love it.
Yes,
Especially, like you, we know each other online, but we haven't talked one-on-one yet. So this is just,
exactly.
I get to find out more about you while introducing you to others, and they get to as well. So I just think it's a delight that the internet allows us to do this. It's fantastic.
I agree. I'm so happy about that. Yeah.
So exciting. Okay, let's start with where you grew up, because I did find out when I was probing a minute ago that it's not in Italy. You did not grow up in Italy. Share.
Yeah, that's right. I'm a Swiss girl. I grew up
Oh,
in Switzerland until I finished my bachelor, which was 28. And then I met this
wow.
guy, like literally one night, and he was just about going to on a world trip for years. And I'm like, okay. And he said, why don't you just come with me? And I'm like, no, come on. I have an important career here. I just finished my bachelor. What am
Oh
I
my
going to
God.
travel now? No way. And then somehow, God has other plans.
Yeah.
And then 2 weeks later, I say to my parents, I'm going to go, I'm just going to go. So
What?
we bought a expedition vehicle and we started actually in Australia, in Brisbane, because
No
that's where the
way.
vehicle was from. And we went on a 2.5 year world trip.
That's amazing.
Yeah,
Sometimes there are pivotal moments when we look back, aren't there? And it sounds like that might
exactly.
have been one of those where you made a decision and you had to be a little bit brave, and off you
Yeah,
went.
totally.
Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah.
I did not know you were going to say that. So that's quite, I'm like, wow, you
Yeah.
came to Australia. Mind you, then my brain's like, you went around the world, but surely not in the same vehicle or did you?
Yeah, I
And
did. And we
that's
actually
crazy.
added a Harley Davidson in America. And then we went with
No.
a Royal Enfield through India and a dirt bike through Cambodia. So we were like really doing it.
So, so the vehicle that you bought here in Australia, you then added
Went
motorbikes as
to,
part of it. So you took that vehicle
yeah,
with you.
so first we went to Greece with the vehicle, and then we went
Yeah.
up to Iceland and all the way to Europe, and then we
Oh,
shipped it to Seattle. And in Seattle is where we took the Harley Davidson on board.
what?
And then we went all the way through Canada and the most beautiful national parks. Like
Incredible.
it was just crazy.
Oh
Yeah.
my
Yeah.
gosh. I've got to reverse all the way back a bit in a minute, but this is fascinating. Because one of the things is I did tell you earlier, and a lot of people who listen avidly to the podcast know that we did a bit of travel about 10 years ago also. with a couple of our
Mm.
children. And at one point, we bought a people mover and we were driving that around Europe. And my husband fell so much in love with it. He was like, we have to take it all the way back to Australia with us. And we were trying to work out how we would even do that. But here you are
Yeah.
telling me that you sort of bought a car here and off you went, regardless
It's
of the
very
water.
difficult.
Yeah.
It's so difficult with the
Mm.
shipping process and everything. Oh my God, it drove me crazy.
I
But it was
imagine.
worth it, because everywhere we went, no matter how remote, we just had a whole house with us.
Yeah.
And we had passed down the hills at sunset where other people would just come and walk, like it was just crazy.
Oh, it sounds amazing. All right, let's go back. Now we've found out that I mean, obviously you're amazing anyway because you live in Italy and you're from Switzerland. And then we found out all the rest of it. Let's do, let's go back a little bit to when you were at school. What was
Yeah.
sport like for you in Switzerland? I'm fascinated by that. What?
So we had like the regular stuff at school where
Yeah.
you have those lessons in between week. But what really was interesting for me was swimming. I swam
Okay.
so much. Yeah, like every day. And I was actually pretty good at it. But mostly I was just outside, because
Yeah.
in our age, we were just outside all
Mm.
the time. So
Yeah.
we ran and played and everything. We were quite active, I would say. Yeah.
Okay. Um, because Switzerland is a landlocked country, isn't it? Like there's
A
no,
landlocked.
as in that doesn't have an
Oh,
ocean.
yes.
Mm.
Yes, that's right.
So,
Yes.
because when we talk to Australians and they talk about
Mm-hmm.
swimming, we're almost always referring to getting into the ocean. So, so
Mm-hmm.
when people
Mm-hmm.
say that they love swimming, I'm like, oh, Switzerland. I never thought of Switzerland and swimming. I think of Switzerland and skiing
Right.
and, that
Yeah.
kind of thing. So it was
Oh,
that,
yeah.
like, what? That's
That we
interesting.
did too.
Yeah.
Skiing, of course.
Yeah.
Yes. Mm.
Um, did you run very much when you were a kid? Was it a part of your school curriculum? Is that like here in Australia?
We called it like athletics.
Yeah.
And so we had these like events, day
Yeah.
events where you just did lots of different kind of running,
Yeah.
either fast, quick tracks or
Yeah.
longer and more. Yeah. Yeah, in that way, yes. But as a child, in that sense, running, I took up way later. Yeah.
Yeah. So do you remember thinking, what do you remember thinking about running when you were at school? Was it something you enjoyed, the prospect of it coming up, or was it something you tried to avoid? Some people didn't
That's a good
necessarily want to do it.
question because honestly, I think I tried to avoid it.
Hmm.
Yeah, I didn't, it felt exhausting.
Yeah. Yeah. That's like a lot of people
And
say that. And I mean, I can remember that myself.
yeah, and I was also a kid that was, I don't know, I felt very lonely most of the
Okay.
time. And so running was like exhausting. And I was more just in my world of
Yeah.
music and singing and
Hmm.
kind of getting by.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was not the easiest time, honestly.
Were you a single child?
No, I had
No?
a sister, but we didn't get along very well.
Okay.
We were very different. We fight a lot.
Yeah.
And yeah, no. But I felt just in general, school was difficult because I was socially too mature when I was in
Yeah.
kindergarten. So they
Yeah.
sent me to school early, but I struggled a lot because I feel like in the brain, you're still not there yet.
Yeah.
So I always had to catch up. And by the
Yeah.
end of a grade, elementary or middle school, I was there. But
Yeah.
the entire process was just like, where am I? Like, this is too
Yeah.
much for me.
Mm.
Socially, I was mature, but in the brain, I felt like I actually should have played.
Yeah.
Because as Swiss, you are very serious. You grow up
Yeah.
in a serious environment.
Yeah.
So I grew up very quick, but they should have actually kept me longer in kindergarten and have me play.
Yeah.
You
It's
know what I
it's
mean? Like
interesting on
it,
reflection, isn't it, when you look back at
yeah,
your life and you can see some of these sort of gaps. We talked about pivotal moments
yes,
a moment ago, but yeah, that's fascinating.
yeah.
Do you play much
Mhm.
now? Just jumping through right to right now. So do you as a
Oh, I
result?
do.
Yeah.
I do.
Yeah.
But I do because I have a stepson. He's 8, and with him I play crazy.
Yeah.
All I
Yeah.
always say like he's my second childhood. Like,
I love it.
yeah,
I love it.
definitely.
I find the same with my kids actually. Yeah. I love that.
Yeah,
Yeah, that they hang around and I get to, even I've still got a 20 and a 21-year-old and his girlfriend are basically here all the time
wow.
and I still get to hang out with them and feel it still
Oh,
makes me
that's
feel quite
amazing.
young. So it's lovely.
Yes. Yeah.
I love it.
Oh,
Um, what did you do at uni? You were saying that you finished your bachelor's. What did you do at
I
school?
studied communication, so both on the personal, but also mostly on the business level. So it was
Hmm.
a very broad study where
Hmm.
you have everything, PR, marketing, all the basics, but also counseling,
Oh, wow.
publication, like all
Yeah.
the stuff around communication.
Mhm.
Yeah.
What did you
Mm.
think you were going to do when you finished your bachelor's? I mean, we know you
Well,
did something else because you headed off and traveled around the world. But what did you think you were heading for
Well,
at
I
that
thought
point?
I'm gonna head for the classical corporate career that
Yeah.
you do in Switzerland because when I was already 21, I already had like 5 people in my team. When I was 24, I had 40 people in my team. And I had this amazing project for young people who wanted to change industry into information technology
Oh,
because I
wow.
was in a recruiting firm.
Yeah.
And I built that project where I made them go to school and have projects with clients of mine. And so they would shift into
Oh, wow.
information technology. And I coached them, I counseled them because often these were people who came from backgrounds that were not like regular,
Yeah.
where society didn't give them much of a chance. And I felt like, no, 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 you're amazing. You just need to remember, right? So I
Yeah.
just took them by the hand, and a lot of them are now actually in wonderful careers,
That's
because
awesome.
I was so excited to be just giving them what I guess I would have
Opportunity.
wanted
Yeah.
to, like just
Yeah.
someone to take them by the hand, and they were amazing. Yeah.
Yeah. Those
And then I thought
opportunities.
I'm
Mm.
just gonna continue that path, into recruiting and corporate
Mhm.
world and earning good money, but also being a workaholic and totally neglecting myself and abandoning myself. I didn't
No.
understand that back
Yeah.
then, but I understood it when I started traveling and I fell into a total burnout,
Yeah. So what did
So
happen
yeah.
there? Explain that. That's an
So
interesting
I
story.
I would just, have the most luxurious life, like
Mm.
living in this super van and going to places with this guy, but I couldn't feel any of it. He would say, "Look at this amazing landscape." And I'm like, "These are just trees. Like, what are you talking about?" Because I couldn't
Oh,
feel anything. I was
that's
so burned
horrid.
out.
Mm.
And then after like 3 or 4 months, I
Hmm.
started to actually land in that experience. And then I was like, oh my God, the world is amazing. And then especially like Iceland and Greece and the national
Oh,
parks, like
wow.
it touched me so deeply. And India too. Yeah, it was such a gift. Yeah.
Wow. So, like, it sounds like your awakening. The trip was a bit of an awakening, if we want to think of a word.
It was.
One
And it
word.
was also my Saturn return at 28, right? It's like the
Wow.
first Saturn
Yeah.
return, a big crisis, but then I really started going to all these retreats, to ashrams in India, to
Yeah.
meditate, to do therapy in Los Angeles, to go to 101 courses. Like that's what
Wow.
we did. We just,
Yeah.
for 6.5 years, we traveled and worked on ourselves. And it was
Wow.
such an awakening for sure.
Wow.
Yeah.
What a blessing to have that opportunity as well, to
I
be able to
know,
do that.
I
That's
know.
fantastic. I love
Yeah,
it.
I'm forever grateful. Like we're not together anymore, but he's my soul brother, and we're
Yeah.
very much sister and brother. Like,
Did you
yeah,
say he
so
was Australian or is Australian?
he was Swiss.
Oh, so he was Swiss. But you came,
Yeah,
why did you come to Australia?
because he found this car, Earth Cruiser, which is a four-wheel expedition vehicle that you could like choose to lay out the way you wanted.
Yeah.
And so he went to Australia, bought the car, and then I joined him and we started traveling.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
I understand. Wow, that's amazing. That gives me all that sorts of shivers because I love exploring. It's a big part of who I am. I just love that
Yeah, I
adventure
can imagine.
and just like every corner is different and yeah, I
Mhm.
love coming home because we go away quite a bit and we go away for long periods. But when I come home, I do really like the home, but it takes
So
me
much.
about a few weeks and then I'm like, okay, I'm ready to go now. Like the moment I
Yeah,
see a camper van or a caravan go past, I'm like, oh, it's time to go.
exactly.
So
Yeah, okay. Oh,
I've,
that's so
it's
nice.
like I've had my home life for a couple of minutes and now I'm ready to go
Yeah,
again. It's kind of funny.
exactly.
I don't know what that is. So so you've done all this, you did all this exploring and you did all this personal development. What happened next in your journey, your
And
personal
then
journey?
I was like, I can't travel anymore. For me, it was
Mm,
too much at some point because you move from one
mm,
thing to the next. There was
yeah,
never any stability, right?
yeah.
So I said, I need to settle down. And he said, yeah, okay, let's settle down in Ibiza, in Spain, the island off the
The
coast.
busy place. I picture,
Yeah,
I've
but you
just
know,
watched the television shows
seven
on Ibiza.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Today it's really like that. But 7 years ago, it was an amazing place.
Oh,
It was
really?
not as
Yeah,
touristy
yeah,
anymore yet as it is today. Drugs and alcohol was
yeah,
kind of a bit there, but under the scene.
yeah.
And so we bought this house near the golf course. I got a dog, and I was just
Oh,
doing. I sang a little bit, but mostly I just kept doing my work and I ate
yeah.
well. I was like vegan and I went to the gym every day. I did spinning and body pump and I
Look at
ran and
you.
it was really a good time, but
Yeah.
we were not well together. Like
Okay.
he and I we had troubles from the start, and he
Yeah.
was the typical love avoidant that I also write in my book about. And so yeah, we had a lot of troubles together. And then at some point I said, you know what, I can't do this anymore. If you
Yeah.
want to continue with me, we got to do therapy together. And
Wow.
so after these 2.5 years in Ibiza, we moved to LA and we did primal therapy for half a year.
Wow. How did that go?
Oh my God, this was the most amazing, life-changing thing that I could have done. Like I owe
Wow.
my life to my therapist, you know. I struggled a
Amazing.
lot with depression and anxiety and
Yeah.
everything, but he changed my life by going to the root of my pain, to the root of my trauma and
Hmm.
into my childhood. And I consider myself quite a normal neurotic. Like I didn't have heavy trauma, you
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
but I wanted to understand why is it that if I didn't have heavy trauma that I feel the way I
Yeah.
feel.
Hmm.
And it's because we all carry that invisible trauma, you
Mm.
know, where we were not loved the way we needed to be loved.
Hmm.
And my mother went away very, very early because she had to work from morning until night. So
Yeah.
after I was born, just 1 month after I was born,
Oh,
I was
wow.
without her.
Mm.
And I couldn't create a secure base. I didn't have secure attachment.
Mm.
And obviously, they struggled a lot with financial stuff and just always working and their own relationship struggles. So, there are a few factors that I consider the invisible trauma because it's
Mm.
not tangible. It's not, you can't grasp it, but it creates what I described, you know, toxic relationships and anxiety and depression and low self-worth.
Mm.
And that is what I really understood in therapy. Like we have to feel the things we were not able to feel when we were
Mm.
small and connect to the original pain and conclude those memories and unresolved stress cycles
Mm.
so we can kind of have a do-over, you
Yeah.
know, and then start from scratch. And then I
Wow.
started to build myself layer after
Yeah.
layer because I was just someone I needed to be to ensure love.
Hmm.
So I was just this edgeless Swiss standard girl,
Yeah.
you know, it was not interesting. And so I had to reconstruct who I wanted to be in this world.
So that's
And
empowering
that took
in and of
time.
itself, in that it was your choice who you became.
And it
Mm.
became my choice. It wasn't before, right?
Mm.
Because before we just try to survive, we
Mm.
please, we adjust, we abandon ourselves, and
Yeah.
then you realize this is not how I'm going to get where I want to be.
Yeah. You just go along with the flow. So,
Yeah.
so to speak. Yeah. Whatever, wherever
Mm-hmm.
you're pushed to be with society
Mm-hmm.
and your family and whatever else circumstances.
Exactly.
Yeah. Wow. So how long did you stay there for? How long were you in the US for?
Then in the US, I was half a year because I had a very quick visa, like two times
Yep.
3 months.
Hmm.
And then I went back to Switzerland because we broke up. I was broke. I had debt with him because
Yeah.
obviously he financed a lot of my time in LA,
Yeah.
which was very, very expensive.
Yeah. I
And
imagine.
so, yeah, I went back to
Yeah.
Switzerland to get back on my own 2 feet. I was there for a year and then I moved away because
Yeah.
Switzerland was not my vibe,
Yeah.
especially not after I've seen the world. But as
Yeah.
soon as I was back on my own 2 feet, thanks God to my network, I moved away and built my own business because all the things that I realized, and there are millions of women like me
Yeah.
who are just anxious in relationships and who
Mm-hmm.
take breadcrumbs and who spend time years in toxic relationships and
Mm.
people like with unrequited love and love avoidant men. And I was like, you gotta share this because you know what it takes to get out of that.
Yeah.
And so I wrote the book, How to Find Love That Heals, and had my podcast called Addicted to Love, and just very passionate about helping women to choose love that does not perpetuate their trauma,
Yeah.
but really create a life that we as women are meant to live, which is full of love and
Mm-hmm.
connection, embodied in our body, right?
So your journey has been what's dictated your next story, which is the story that you just shared there, and the path that you've taken to develop your own business and then share what you've learned with others over
Exactly.
sort of the last, how many years would that have been? I'm trying to up my head.
Seven
Yeah,
years,
yeah,
probably.
yeah.
Yeah.
So you've sort of been developing that to take it to the world and help more
Mm.
people with what you've learned. It's amazing. So
Yeah, thank
before
you.
we got on, we talked very briefly about the titles and what you call yourself and what you're putting forward into the world. Do you want to share that a little bit, and then we'll go back and talk a little bit about your running and how that might have supported where you are now, which would be fascinating.
Hmm.
Hmm.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. Yeah, I would call myself a transformational leader and relationship expert
Yeah,
because I just facilitate deeper realms of personal growth and emotional healing.
yeah.
So mostly I work really in the depth because, out there, especially today and on social media, you find a lot of spiritual bypassing,
Hmm.
and everyone calls himself a coach. And especially after COVID, like it's became such a trend, right?
Yeah, it's
But
true.
but what I just notice is people just keep running from one thing to the next, always hoping that it's going to be different this time.
Mm-hmm.
But I I understood that if you don't go back to the original pain and
Hmm.
work at the depth and in the shadow, there's no way that you're going to have a lasting transformation.
Hmm.
So this is what I do. I just facilitate transformation, and I include the body as much, maybe even more than the mind. So it's
Yeah.
not like top bottom, but it's bottom top approach,
Okay.
where you really land in the body and you understand, what feelings are there and what it is that you're afraid to feel, to
Yeah.
then connect that with where that actually started, and then take the conclusions up to your brain and
And
the
then work
cognitive
through that.
thinking,
Mm,
and then make
mm,
a reframing of that,
mm.
right? So it's called emotional recycling. It's a seven
Yeah.
stage progress or step progress. And I work mostly with women and couples, but
Yeah.
actually I interestingly CEOs find me as well, because often men are so disconnected from their
Mm.
body that this approach actually lands really well with them too.
That's beautiful. I love
Mm.
that.
Mm.
We will, of course, put a link to your book and to your website and any way that people might want to get in touch with you and see
Oh,
if
thank
there's
you.
a good synergy between you and them and that you can
Mm.
do some work together. Because, of course, I think we all need to work on ourselves. That's the journey that we're on from the start to the end
Yes.
of our lives. It's just a journey. There's no
Mm-hmm.
destination, as I say so often on this podcast, or even though we're mostly talking about running, but there's yeah, the destination is not the end goal. It's the journey itself and finding a way through that, um,
It's
which
true.
serves you as
That's
you
so
as an
true.
individual. So I love that. I love what you're doing. Um, can we take a couple of steps back and introduce where you decided to do a little bit of running? You were talking about being an obesa. I don't know if that's where it
Mm-hmm.
was when you first sort of decided that running would help support, you becoming healthier and all of that.
Yeah, I mean, in Ibiza, it started
Mhm.
with the golf course that just had a beautiful path track that I
Yeah,
could just go every morning. And then in Switzerland, because we have a lot of fields, right?
of
So I was
course.
just running in the fields, which is,
Hmm.
oh, I love it. And then in Italy too, but Italy was more difficult because here you have every house is like guarded,
I
there's a
know.
lot of land, but
I
it's
noticed that
always
when I was
guarded,
there. It's
right?
amazing. I know. We often
Yeah.
used to talk about it and we wondered whether my husband this thought, oh, is it because they're still very close to, and I don't want to say feudal, but that time when they were all kind of warring with each other and they're very
Yeah,
protective of
yeah,
their
yeah.
little bit of space and they keep it very pretty, but then they put the
Mhm.
rubbish outside in public space. Very, that's what we noticed. But
That sounds about right.
their own property was very tidy and very behind walls and being protected. Yeah,
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
fascinating. Yeah, it's interesting you say that.
But now,
So,
thanks God, I'm again out on the fields and I have
yeah,
a lot of fields and I can run, But running is really one part of my
yeah.
routine because I have a hernia in my neck. So if I run
Oh,
too much, it really starts hurting.
out.
So I just combine it with yoga and
Yeah,
pranayama and meditation and breath
yeah,
work. Yeah, mostly this combination for me. And also strengthening the body
yeah.
because that helps a lot with the neck.
Mm,
So it's kind of like I do it once or twice a week,
yeah,
and then the rest is all other stuff. I
yeah.
like that combination of
Sort of that
things.
other body movements which support the things that are going on in your body. Definitely.
Exactly.
How do you feel when you're running now?
Oh my God.
What does it do to you?
I feel mostly really good if I
Hmm.
honor where I'm at today. So
Hmm.
I'm not the person that just pushes through no matter
Yeah.
what.
Hmm.
I run with how my body is, and especially also cyclically. So because we are women,
Yeah.
we have very different, how we feel is different every day. So sometimes, even if I feel like, no, 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 today I'm like so exhausted, so I'm just going to walk, I
Yeah.
walk.
Yeah.
And then sometimes I feel like I'm a fucking machine today. I'm going to run really fast. So, yeah, for me, it's a way to
Yeah.
listen deeply to my body and what it needs today and what it wants, right? It's also very much like pleasure based. I live life a little bit like pleasure based, always in tune with what do I really desire today? It's
Oh,
it's one of the most self-honoring acts that I can give myself to not push, 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 because
yeah.
that's very masculine. That's like very my old way of being, but really like just, how does it feel like today? And then really listen to that.
Do you wonder, like, I guess the masculine part of me wants to ask, when,
Mhm,
because I probably am a bit more like I'm very A-type personality and I do tend
mhm,
to push myself, especially when it
mhm,
comes to my physical endeavors, things like that. But I wonder whether sometimes if there isn't some push, especially if you know what you're doing is good
mhm.
for you, but for whatever reason you don't feel motivated to do it today, is
Yeah.
that, I mean, I hear what you're saying too, like listening to what's going on in your body, and maybe you don't feel like it today, but there would be some people who aren't as healthy and as fit as you or I. They're never
Yeah.
going to feel like their body, or at least trying to find what that is. Is it, it's beyond a physical feeling, I suppose what I'm saying, because if you're really
Mm,
quite unfit, just from a
mm.
practical perspective, it's very hard to feel like, at least physically, you might, and maybe
Yeah.
that's really the distinction that I've coming to myself, that it's more about what you emotionally, and that
Mhm.
in your mind you do want to go for a run because you do want to have the
Yeah.
feeling that you'll have when you finish it. Even if your body, because it's not fit at the moment, doesn't necessarily want to go. Does that? I feel like I'm going around in
That
circles a little bit,
I no
but
no no. I think you're saying a very important point because what I'm not talking about and what
mm,
I guess many people talk about is like
yeah.
finding excuses not to do
Yeah,
things
we talk about a
and
motivation,
never
of course, like on the
right.
podcast quite a bit when people are talking about running. We talk about how do you motivate yourself to get out there on those days when you don't want to, but for some reason you have a goal, that whether it's that's better health, or if it's a race you're training for. So there's
Mhm.
these goals that people are training for. So they need to have some motivation to keep moving. That makes
Yeah,
sense.
and
Yeah.
I just call it like gentle discipline, because
Yeah.
I
Oh, I
feel
like that term. It's
stretching
lovely.
is always good. Like
Mm.
stretching is always
Hmm.
good, but not stretching beyond your capacity.
Mm.
Like my mindset is still like I want to grow and I want
Yeah.
to get better and I want
Mm.
to uphold my commitment, I would
Yeah.
say, but I'm not stretching beyond my capacity because I see a lot of women just pushing no matter what.
Yeah.
And that's what I think is really unhealthy,
Yeah.
you know?
It's interesting because I'm also playing at the moment with mindfulness, as you know, and been
Mm.
learning from a professor of mindfulness. And one of the things she talks about is how we limit as well.
Mm-hmm.
So it's, how
Mm-hmm.
we do, and whether it's the words that we use, our society is certainly full of limiting words. Um,
Yeah.
and, but we're so busy and so consumed by technology and not with ourselves. And I think this is maybe where the difference is between what I'm describing and what you do, because you're very in touch with who you are and where you are, and you're not always allowing outside influences to be your
Mm-hmm.
entertainment and taking up
Mm-hmm.
space in your head all the time. In fact, you're happy to just be listening to yourself. And I think maybe
Mm-hmm.
that's where the difference is. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and so therefore the limits are things, or you don't. Like I guess for her in mindfulness, and I feel like I'm sort of treading water again, but her with mindfulness with that I was talking about with the professor and is how we have no limits, and that's basically what she's been trying to say. Apart from the fact that we put them on there and society gives them
Oh,
to us and things
yes.
like that, but reality is we don't have any limits, and
Yes.
I love that. I just love that
That's
concept that
amazing.
we have no limits, and anything that is limiting me, I put it there or I allowed it to be put there. And so, so I'm struggling. I don't struggle, but playing with these concepts of therefore, oh, I don't feel like going running today. But am I limiting? Is that me limiting myself because for some reason that's legitimate? But therefore, if we don't have any limits, are any limiting things legitimate? It's like my whole brain starts playing with these what feel like opposing
Yeah.
forces.
Yeah.
Is
Yeah.
that yeah.
Yeah. I mean, limiting, I think that is the challenge because
Yeah.
I know I'm limitless, but I still am so limited. Even
Yeah.
after all this work and everything that I know, I still struggle with many things where I feel like I'm not living up to my potential, where I'm not showing up the way I could, where I'm not consistent. But I
Mm.
think that's just the journey, and
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
and, and I just try not to be hard and just accept those limitations.
Yeah.
And at the same time, I just keep striving to like
Expand
expand
them.
and
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah,
That's
but
beautiful.
in my own time, I would say.
I suppose, from a very practical standpoint, we have a human body. And that in itself is
Mm-hmm.
limiting, unfortunately. Like even though we're
Exactly.
limitless, we have a human
Exactly.
body that we're encased within, and our heart can only go this and our for the time being. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, I feel like I'm starting to limit myself again. Stop it. I'm not going to do that. Anyway, it's kind of playing with the word. I love it. It's fascinating to me. I did some
Mm-hmm.
philosophy at university, and I think
Oh,
that probably
wow.
triggered my mind to keep like, but why? I don't know, but why? And you just
Yeah,
keep
yeah, yeah, yeah.
digging until your head starts to hurt, and it's like, hold on, I've just gone so far down a rabbit hole. I don't know how to get out of it.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Mm-hmm.
anyway, so I'm sorry if I did that. Um,
No, no.
I wanted to ask you when you're going for a run and everything feels great, what's going on in your
Mm-hmm.
mind? Like, are you thinking
Oh,
about things in particular, or is it just free to float around?
yeah.
Like, what's going on? Hmm.
Well, it's very orgasmic if
Oh,
everything goes well. It's
I
like
love that.
you perceive everything, right? Like you smell, you see the things as the most beautiful things. Your entire body is lit up. And I think it's a feeling of freedom.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
just a
totally.
feeling of freedom and no constrictions. And because when are we ever truly without worries and fears and
Mhm.
everything, right? But
Yeah,
when those endorphins hit and you are just like, I'm in it, babe, like, okay,
exactly.
this is it. That's just, oh my, it's orgasmic. It's orgasmic,
I
I
love
would say.
that. I think that
Mhm.
is the first time after I think you'll be about 330 odd episodes that anybody has used orgasmic as a way to describe their running. So,
Yeah.
so well done. I think that's beautiful. Um, can you describe, like I'm a very positive person, so I tend to hang like or ask a lot of questions about things like,
Mhm.
can you describe what your favorite run was like? Like, I mean, we know it was orgasmic, but like, where were you? Was it in
Yeah.
the fields?
Yeah.
Was it, where were you?
No,
At a
it
beach
was
or?
actually in a park in Perugia, which is maybe 20 minutes from my house. and it's covered with like trees, really gorgeous trees, and it has this running path on both sides because in the middle there's a little river, like tiny river, and
Oh,
it's near a sports center. So there is also the track for the
yeah.
bicycles, and then there are the stuff for kids to play. And it was just this like very warm summer day, but not too hot because I was under the shades of the trees, and I was sweating and I was feeling the way I just described
Yeah.
to you. And it's just like, oh my God, my life is just so good. And it's like it was the perfect moment because it was warm, I was sweating, I was alive, I was free, and I had also hit a little bit of a milestone where I could feel that I'm not restricted so much anymore by my lungs and my
Yeah.
legs that are tired. And I think it was a little bit of progress. And so all of that came together, and it was just, life is so good, you know?
I just love that. It
Mm-hmm.
almost feels like it is me time, as I've said plenty of times on the
Mm.
podcast, but it's a time that you,
Mm-hmm.
like all of those other things. And when I had a bad marriage in my 20s, my mum
Mm.
used to say, "What are you running away from?" But I would say, "No, I'm running to
Mm.
something. I'm running
Mm.
to my future self, rather than running away
Yes.
from." But there is that sense of just being able to just be you and be with you, and it's your
Yes.
time and especially as you get fitter, it feels even better. And it's not just endorphins and things. It's you're able to move through space under your own steam and have that kind of self-efficacy that it's you who's doing that. And I think that's probably
Exactly.
where all of the orgasmic it's
Yeah.
sort of feeling is. It's very much you and you're being authentically you if you've
Mm-hmm.
managed to get to that sort of place with your running, which I think
Yeah.
makes it then very hard to ever give up your running, I think,
It's
when
true.
once
It's
you hit
true.
those things. Which I often ask people on the podcast, how long do you think you'll run for? How long do you think it'll be part of your life?
I think until I can, because I just worry a bit about my neck,
Hmm.
and my hips are a little bit sometimes a bit vulnerable, but as long as I can. Yeah.
Hmm. Mm.
Because also my partner's parents, they ran until 70.
Of
Like
course.
it was a big thing, right? Like
Yeah.
you just keep running. Because there's no limitation. It's also like with the age, right? Like we just
Yeah.
know, oh, you get older and then you can't run because you're going to hurt yourself. Yeah, and
No.
I try not to do that.
I don't.
Oh.
That's a limit. Not
Mm-hmm,
taking that
mm-hmm,
on board.
mm-hmm,
They can keep
mm-hmm.
that the older people or the younger
Exactly.
people who want
Yeah.
to take it into their old age. I'm not doing that
Yes.
at all. Um,
Mm-hmm.
with your running, is um, with your life, well, how am I going to explain it? Because a lot of people that I talk to obviously are racing and things like that. So it's not something that you don't sign up to events, or I imagine you don't sign up for events and then train
No.
for them. It's more about running, supporting your everyday life and your health
Mm-hmm.
goals rather than, running goals, racing goals or whatever.
Yes.
It's yeah, you don't have those kind of event goals. Um, so when I ask this question, I suppose it's still quite relevant, but if you hadn't included running in your health regime, do you do you think how do you think your life would be, I suppose? So what has it given you that you wouldn't have had necessarily had you not included it in your health regime? Sort of,
Yeah, that's a good question because definitely there would be a big difference because when
mm,
I usually do sports, it's more static. So I'm on the floor, on the mat.
mm-hmm,
I sit a lot in meditation or breath work, but it's all here in this little space.
mm,
And you never feel as alive as when your heartbeat goes up. So
mm,
running does that
mm-hmm,
for me. And it always calls me back really, really into the body more than anything else.
mm,
So also it's the same thing with like maybe with the bicycle or when you do, I don't know, high intensity thing,
mm,
right? So that's a whole different quality that brings a quality to your life that I
mm.
wouldn't want to miss, right?
When you're doing your work, I mean, it's interesting that you say that. So do you ever recommend to the people that you work with to do something like running or like sort of physical exercise or go hiking or walking or whatever as a part of
Yes,
it?
definitely.
Mm,
Because when you do the emotional work, it's fundamental to care for the body as well. Like I
mm,
remember when I went to Tony Robbins seminars, he said that it's the body is where it starts.
mm,
So it's not just looking for a good exercise routine, but it's, I tell them like sleep is essential. Go to sleep early,
Hmm.
wake up early. Eat. For example, I eat the way, I don't know if you know her, but on Instagram there is Glucose Goddess. And she's written
No.
this amazing book about how when you eat in the right order your food, so
Okay.
first you eat the fibers and the proteins and the fats, and then in the end the starches, your glucose level in the blood is not spiking as if you ate the other way around, which we often do,
Oh,
especially in Italy. You start with pasta, but then you have these spikes.
and coffee.
And
And coffee.
yeah, all of these types
Lots
of
of coffee.
things that we love but aren't really good for us, right? So I include a whole holistic approach that
Yeah.
really supports the body, and that like exercise is part of it.
It's interesting that you say that, and it reminds me of another one of my topics that I'm fond of, and that is the fact that we are a whole body. There is no
Mhm.
separation between mind and body, or even mind, body, and spirit. Like we are all one thing,
Yes,
and the
absolutely.
anything that you do to any other part of your body will affect the other part. So um
So much.
just on a practical level, I've just watched my father go through quite he's quite unwell, and I've just watched him interacting with the medical world, and it's just
Mm.
so many specialists who come in and they just
Mm.
treat their area, and it doesn't, and then what they do then has a knock-on effect to a different area, which
Yes.
very few people just stand back and look at the whole picture of what's going
Mm.
on. And
Mm.
whereas though, people in his family and people who are around him all the time, you can see it. It's actually really clear. But because the way the medical system is set up, quite often it's just these sort of siloed you know, specialists who just treat what they're specialists about, and that's it. And they don't
Yes.
seem to see all the other things that are going on. Which so I think it's wonderful that your coaching is taking in, the whole body and the whole mind and yeah, the whole being is probably a really good way to put it, rather than just one element, perhaps that they come to you for. I love hearing some of those stories where people come to a professional and they come for a particular thing
Yeah.
that's wrong, and the
And
professional
then
gives them something that seems to be nothing to do with what they actually came for, but actually in the end it's what helps them the best. And I
yes.
think they're kind of fascinating stories to hear.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah,
Um,
yeah, yeah.
Now we didn't get some of the story of how you got to Italy, and I'm very interested in that. I know it's not necessarily about running, but I'm very interested about how that happened because I'm kind of nosy. So how did you get to Italy?
Well, when I came back to Switzerland to rebuild my life, I felt a little bit this Julia Roberts moment, eat, pray, love,
Oh,
you
hello,
know?
Jewel. I love Eat, Pray, Love. That was
And
awesome.
and I was like, Tuscany is the perfect place for me to build my business because in Switzerland you
Hmm.
spend $5,500 a month to just
Yeah.
live. And in
Yeah.
Italy you spend maybe, I don't know, 2,000 euros for the same
Hmm.
thing.
Yeah.
So I was like, no, 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 I'm going to go to Tuscany. And I was looking on Airbnb through 300 apartments, and none of them was calling me. And then there was this little stone house in the hills of Montone, which is in the north of Umbria. And I'm like, this is the place. This is the place. I'm going to go there. So I didn't even know Umbria, like really. But then I ended up in Umbria and I fell in love with the energy of this place. And I'm like, this is amazing. It was hilly, it was green, it was simple, like people, you pay $1 for a cappuccino and you can go to the theater
Oh,
for 10 euros. And
and the
I was like,
tomatoes melt in
yeah,
your mouth. I
yeah.
bet they're
And oh my
amazing.
God, the food. Oh my God, the food, the food, the food. We
I
could
love
talk
it.
an hour
I
about
love
food.
it. I love it.
My partner is a chef, Italian chef, so you can imagine.
Oh my Lord.
And yeah, and as soon as I came here, I was clear that I'm gonna stay here for the next few years. And then I fell in love with
So
my partner. So
that
then
was
it
the
was
love
clear.
part of Eat, Pray, Love.
Exactly. Because the spiritual part I kind of already had going. And so these two things were actually, now that you say it, yes, this is a complete eat, pray, love
Oh
cycle.
my gosh, I love it.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So you fell in love with this bloke who likes to cook you food, and
Hmm.
and you also ended up with a stepchild as well. And now
Yes.
you're happily ensconced in, I suppose, is it country or is it mountainous? Is it a mountainous area or is it?
It's a hilly
It is
area.
hilly area.
Yeah, very hilly.
In the middle of Italy, in the middle of the
Yes.
world. That's amazing.
Hmm.
So,
Hmm.
so
Hmm.
jealous. It's such a beautiful place of part of the world. We will all
Well,
have to
you're
come and
always
visit.
welcome to visit. Ah, yes, you are. You are. We'll
I
cook you
just,
the best food
oh
and
my
you
gosh.
can go to the best places. Oh yeah, I'll
I
take you.
just, oh, I love it. I love it. Well, now, I often ask people about identity, but it's usually about running identity. I don't,
Mhm.
well, do you call yourself a runner? Is that part of your identity? Is that one of the things that you carry with you?
No, definitely not, because I don't actually like identities. Even when I
Hmm.
call myself what I do for work, I feel like, no, no, no,
Yeah.
no, I'm a shapeshifter. It's too much. Like, I don't
Don't
want to
put me in
put
a box.
myself into a box.
Yeah.
No, I'm just a person that's alive, I
Yeah.
would say.
I
I
knew you'd
just
have
try
an
to be
interesting
alive.
answer to this question. I knew it. Which is just perfect. It's what we want. Um,
Hmm.
is there anything about running that we haven't talked about that you want to share from your perspective of running?
Hmm. Hmm. Running. I think it's just a really great tool, a tantric tool,
Mm,
because it's a tool for expansion.
mm,
Because running is more than just, expanding your physical capacity.
mhm.
It's expanding your mental, your emotional, and we can use it as a tool, like even to just digest everyday life, because we're always so full of everything.
Yeah.
And I always imagine when I run through my feet touching the ground, I can just discharge, discharge,
Yeah.
discharge,
Oh,
discharge.
that's
So it's,
awesome. I love that. That's a great
yeah,
visual.
it's a
Mm,
really good tool,
mm,
tantric tool
mm,
for expansion, healing,
mm,
evolution, growth.
mm,
If we do it, as you say, if we do it mindfully.
mm.
Because I can treat running as unmindful as I do everything else in my life,
Absolutely. Hmm.
but I can use it as a great tool to connect even with God and spirit and the world at
Mm,
large.
mm. It's
Yeah,
really quite a
this
grounding
counts.
activity if you allow
Mm-hmm.
it to be. Mm,
Yeah.
mm.
Mm-hmm.
Beautiful. Well,
Mm.
we can have a chat in a minute off the recording,
Yeah.
but
Uh-huh.
it's been such a delight to
Oh, thank
learn
you.
more about you, Aleah, and I'll
Thank you
put
so much for
put all
having
of
me.
your links and all of your bits and pieces on the show notes so that people can reach out to you, because I'm sure they will, because it's been quite an interesting conversation full of lots of nuggets of goodness and it just and little surprises, which has been really
Yeah,
fun.
that's good.
I've loved it. I really have. So thank you for joining us. Um, Before we wrap up, though, I always ask for people for beginner tips for runners, and I'm really interested if someone came up to you because they saw you running. You go running a couple of times a week, and they said, "Look, I've been really wanting to start running, Aleah. What would you suggest that they do?"
Yeah, just be really kind with yourself. All you look for is progress, not like
Hmm.
intensity. So even if you can start with 5 minutes and then you go 6 and 7 and 8 and 9, that's a win. Because people are often just overwhelmed because it feels like undoable. But
Yeah,
it's about consistency, no? As George also always says, it's a consistency, not
totally.
intensity. And
Yeah.
it's about progress. And if that progress is just 1%, you're
Mm.
winning.
Yeah, that's perfect. That's
Mm.
so true. Thank you, George.
Yeah, thank you, George.
All right. Again, don't jump off. I'll say goodbye to you off the recording as well. But
Yes.
it has been an absolute delight to get to know
Thank you
you.
so
Thank you.
much, Michelle.
Really appreciate
Yeah,
it. Sharing yourself
me too.
with everyone.
Thank you guys so much for listening. Yeah.
Thank you for listening to the Fit Mind, Fit Body podcast. I'd love to talk to you about your running journey. Send me a message on Facebook or on the website and let's do it. I also wanted to let you know that I've created an email list so you won't miss any podcast episodes. You'll find details in the show notes and on the Fit Mind, Fit Body website, along with a bunch of resources on mindful running. They'll help you to get and stay mentally and physically fit. And I'll see you there. Plus, I'll be back here in your podcast player a few times a week. Hit subscribe so you don't miss an episode. And before you go, I'd really appreciate it if you would leave a review. It'll help more people to find the podcast and get inspired to start running and ultimately to improve their life. See you soon.